Give you some more perspectives on here, and here are some of the facts and figures to this election that's just been cancelled. Raila Odinga has contested and lost the last 3 elections. His claims of vote rigging in the 2007 elections tipped the country into its worst crisis for decades. Kenyatta had won a second term with 54% of the vote, while Odinga polled 44.74% of the vote. No presidential election in Kenya has ever been nullified before. This is the first time an election will be nullified by a court in Africa. Some presidential elections have been annulled in Africa before. June 1993 presidential election was annulled by the then military leader in Nigeria. And let's dig deeper. Executive Director, Partners for Electoral Reforms, Mr. Ezenwa Nwagu is in our Abuja studio, and Mr. Liberus Oshoma, a lawyer and political analyst, is here in Lagos. We will also be joined at some point by Benji Ndolo from Kenya. But let's begin the conversation now. As it stands right now, there seems to be a lot of anticipation. But let's listen to a political analyst from Kenya, Benji Ndolo. Many thanks, Benji, for talking to us this evening from Nairobi. What is the mood like in your country, and how do you think this will pan out at the end of the day?
Thank you. Good evening, and hello to the people of Nigeria. Certainly, there's a lot of anxiety in this country. There's also a lot of excitement, but certainly is the mood of uncertainty, of disbelief, of shock. This has never happened, as you have well outlined there in your opening comments for the bulletin. This has is not only unprecedented in Kenya, but also in the continent of Africa. A presidential election, particularly one where the incumbent, the occupier of State House, is still at State House, and then a court comes, looks at the evidence, and nullifies. This is unheard of. People are very, very, very surprised here. People are also thinking and celebrating that this is a progressive move. It's something that points to the independence of institutions, and certainly that the judiciary has proved itself to be not under the all-reaching arm of the executive. And so there's a lot of build-up now towards the 60 days, which is really a short window before the next election is done. But certainly a very, very historic day in Kenya. Lots of anxiety, really, to be honest.
This is perhaps going to be a very big political dilemma for the country. The opposition leader, Raila Odinga, is saying that they lack confidence in the electoral body. Do you think that there might be a dissolution of the umpire before the election in Kenya?
Yes, my own prediction, and I'm, as you said, I do governance work professionally. I'm a governance consultant. I actually happen to have an office in the same building as the electoral body, and I can tell you that the predecessor to this particular commission, the Isaac Hassan Commission, had it very rough. I mean, it was really a dogfight, complete with demonstrations and police clobbering and tear gas and all of that. And from what we're hearing so far, I can tell you by next week, the commissioners will have a big fight on their hands. The opposition leader has a huge following. His deputy, Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka and Musalia Mudavadi, are both senior, important people in this country. Both of them former vice presidents, also with a following, with resources. And so with this kind of senior politicians coming at you hammer and tongs, it's just a matter of time before they fall. I mean, with the kind of support that the opposition has as well, it will be virtually impossible for the IEBC, for the electoral body that has been alleged or accused of so many improprieties and now found to be, have not run the election according to the right way. They've even gone further and actually called for their arrest and prosecution. They've gone even further than that with Raila, who is not a judge, saying that they should be in jail. I quote. That's a very, very serious statement.
Benji Ndolo, many thanks. Political analyst from Nairobi in Kenya. Thanks so much for your thoughts there. let's take the conversation forward as we look at the implications for Nigeria, the continent's biggest brother in terms of economy and political and population also. I have Liberals Oshoma, a lawyer here. Let me begin the conversation with you. Legally speaking, when the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, pronounces and nullifies an election for Africa, what does this imply?
You know, like the man from Kenya said, over time, there's always this tendency to believe that the judiciary in Africa is an appendage of the executive arm. But with what is happening, what has happened in Kenya, the judiciary there has taken a step, you know, to stamp its independence, you know, on the face of Kenyans and also on the continent of Africa. And so that's a big leap. It had happened in Nigeria at various occasions. Remember the 1983 election, but the Supreme Court came to the rescue for public policy reasons. And then also in 2003, also the Supreme Court, some of the reasons they gave were, you know, the costs that will, if these elections are nullified, the cost implications and all of that. And so it was better to pander towards finding a way to manage and ameliorate the damage.
A soft landing.
You know, give a soft landing. But the Supreme Court in Kenya had taken it, you know, a notch further to say, look, the elections are the only sacrament that allow people to participate in government. And in America, you still see American, after the election, still finding, you know, trying to find out what actually went wrong. And so what the Supreme Court in Kenya simply said is, look, we will not settle for second best. If there are irregularities that the manual voting and the electronic voting did not tally, then there are irregularities.
This is a country that has about less than 20 million registered voters. Nigeria went into 2015 election with almost 70 million voters. And when we wonder, like as it happened in Kenya, the implication is going to be huge. If you look at the cost of conducting elections in Kenya, is perhaps, and the campaign in Kenya is perhaps the largest, second largest in the world, and perhaps the largest or the most expensive in Africa.
Almost the same thing with that of Nigeria.
If they reconduct an election in Kenya in the next 60 days, financially, economically, what do you think is the implication?
You know, what I think the picture, the bigger picture the court is looking at is not about the financials now, but look, we need to spend what we need to spend to get it right. And that's so, if would it have been better if you allow an irregular election and then at the end of the day, the government that was not duly elected spends billions of budgets, you know, over time, like in Kenya, it's 5 years, you know. So what they are saying is, irrespective of how much would be involved, it is better to get it right. Let the will of the people prevail. And so that's the learning point.
All right. It may be not cost effective, but the implications for democracy may be dire. Perhaps that's what my guest is saying. We have an election expert in our Abuja studio, Ezenwa Inwago. We will come to you in a moment, but after this break. Join us again, everyone.